Open the door to some people's bathrooms and you'll find a chaos of toothpaste smears, damp towels on the floor, and a mirror fogged with old water spots. Open the door to someone else's and it looks like a hotel. Folded towels, a spotless sink, everything in its place every single day. Same species, same 24 hours in a day. Wildly different relationship with a small tiled room. We tend to think this is just a preference. Some people are clean people, some aren't. But psychologically, there's a lot more going on behind that spotless sink than simple preference. It touches personality science, anxiety regulation, upbringing, even evolutionary disgust responses. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why some people can't relax until that bathroom is spotless, and what that habit is quietly doing for their mental state. Let's be precise about what we're actually describing. This isn't about people with clinical obsessive-compulsive disorder. We'll draw that distinction clearly later. We're talking about a much more common, everyday pattern. People who maintain consistent, voluntary cleanliness in private spaces without anyone checking on them. The bathroom is a particularly interesting test case for psychologists because it's one of the few rooms in a home that's almost entirely private. Nobody sees it but you, and maybe a partner or roommate. That makes it a kind of behavioral litmus test. How you treat a space nobody is grading you on tends to reveal something closer to your actual internal baseline, not a performance for other people. In personality psychology, this maps closely onto one of the big 5 personality traits: conscientiousness, the tendency toward organization, self-discipline, and dependable follow-through. People high in conscientiousness don't just clean because the bathroom is dirty. They clean because a clean environment is part of how they regulate themselves. Of the big 5 personality traits, openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism, conscientiousness is the one most consistently linked to tidiness across dozens of studies. High conscientiousness individuals tend to plan ahead, follow through on routines, and feel a kind of internal discomfort when tasks are left undone. For these people, a messy bathroom isn't just visually unpleasant. It registers almost like an unfinished task sitting in the back of their mind, quietly demanding attention until it's resolved. Here's where it gets more psychologically interesting. For a lot of people, cleaning isn't really about hygiene at all. It's about control. Life is unpredictable. Work stress, relationship stress, finances, most of it is outside our direct control. But a bathroom? You can control every inch of that. Wipe a counter, and it's immediately visibly clean. Scrub a mirror, and the result is instant and guaranteed. Psychologists refer to this as a form of self-regulation through environmental control. When the outside world feels chaotic, controlling a small, contained space provides a genuine, measurable sense of calm. There's also a more primal layer here: disgust sensitivity, an evolved psychological trait that varies significantly between individuals. Some people have a naturally higher disgust response to bacteria, mold, and bodily residue, all of which concentrate heavily in bathrooms. This isn't a character trait so much as a nervous system setting. People high in disgust sensitivity aren't choosing to be bothered by grime. Their brain is registering a stronger threat signal from the same mess that barely registers for someone else. A huge factor here is simply what was modeled at home growing up. Children raised in households where cleaning routines were consistent and where chores had clear ownership tend to internalize cleanliness as a default behavior rather than an active decision. It becomes automatic, almost unconscious, much like brushing your teeth. Conversely, someone raised in a chaotic or inconsistent household may never have developed that automatic routine, not from laziness, but because the neural pathway for clean as you go was simply never built early on. Finally, there's the habit science angle. Behavioral psychologists describe habits as a loop: a cue, a routine, and a reward. For someone who cleans their bathroom daily, the cue might be stepping out of the shower. The routine is a 30-second wipe down, and the reward is a small hit of satisfaction and order. Once this loop repeats enough times, it stops requiring willpower entirely. It becomes identity. I'm just someone who keeps things clean. which is a much more durable motivator than discipline alone. There's a well-known concept in environmental psychology called the broken windows theory, originally used to describe urban decay, but it applies just as well to a bathroom sink. The idea: visible small signs of disorder tend to invite more disorder. One dirty towel left on the floor makes a second dirty towel feel more acceptable. A toothpaste-smeared sink lowers the bar for letting more grime accumulate. People who keep their bathrooms spotless are often, consciously or not, defending against this slide because they intuitively understand that mess compounds. The reverse is also true. Order tends to sustain order. A spotless counter creates a kind of psychological pressure to keep it spotless. This is why clean bathroom people often report that maintenance actually gets easier over time, not harder. The environment itself becomes a passive enforcer of the habit. Environmental psychologists have long argued that our surroundings aren't just a reflection of our mental state, they actively shape it. A cluttered, grimy space has been shown in multiple studies to correlate with elevated cortisol and reported stress, while orderly spaces correlate with a subjective sense of calm and control. In other words, the clean bathroom isn't just an output of a calm mind. For a lot of people, it's an active input, a small, controllable environment they maintain specifically because it keeps their mind calmer in return. Humans are deeply social animals, and cleanliness has long functioned as a subtle social signal, historically linked to status, health, and even moral character. Studies on social perception consistently show that people unconsciously associate cleanliness with competence, trustworthiness, and self-discipline, even when it has nothing to do with someone's actual abilities. That means a spotless bathroom isn't purely a private matter. For many people, it's quietly tied to self-image, even in a room where, technically, no one else is watching. In the last decade, platforms built around aesthetic home content have added a new layer entirely. Clean girl, minimalist bathroom aesthetics, and viral cleaning routines have turned tidiness from a private habit into a publicly performed identity for many people, reinforcing the behavior through likes, comments, and a sense of belonging to an aesthetic community. This doesn't make the underlying psychology less real, but it does show how a private, internally regulated habit can become externally reinforced and amplified by modern digital culture. Cleanliness differences are also one of the most common and most underestimated sources of friction between partners and roommates. Because the bathroom is used by everyone but owned emotionally by whoever cares most, mismatched standards here often produce disproportionate conflict relative to how small the actual mess usually is. Interestingly, research on relationship conflict suggests it's rarely about the mess itself. It's about what the mess represents: respect, consideration, and shared responsibility for a communal space. Now for an important distinction. Everything described so far describes healthy, voluntary conscientiousness, and it's worth stating clearly: wanting a clean bathroom is not a disorder. But there is a point where this pattern can tip into something clinically different. Obsessive-compulsive disorder, specifically contamination-based OCD, involves intrusive, unwanted thoughts about contamination, paired with compulsive cleaning rituals performed specifically to reduce overwhelming anxiety. Not satisfaction, not preference, but genuine distress relief from an intrusive thought loop. The clearest distinguishing factor is choice and flexibility. A conscientious clean bathroom person can skip a day of cleaning and feel mildly annoyed, but they move on. Someone with contamination OCD often cannot skip the ritual without significant, disproportionate distress. The behavior isn't optional, and it isn't really about a clean result. It's about quieting an intrusive, anxious thought that will return regardless of how clean the space already is. If cleaning rituals start consuming hours rather than minutes, interfere with work, relationships, or daily functioning, or if skipping them triggers genuine panic rather than mild irritation, that's a signal worth discussing with a mental health professional, not something to push through alone. The goal of this video isn't to self-diagnose from a YouTube explainer. It's to know where the healthy end of this spectrum ends. For the vast majority of people, cleanliness in this form is simply a low-cost, high-reward habit. It costs a few minutes a day and reliably delivers a sense of order, a small win, and, according to environmental psychology research, a measurable reduction in perceived daily stress. The research on habit formation is consistent. The people who maintain this long-term rarely rely on willpower. They rely on tiny, repeatable routines tied to an existing cue. Wiping the counter right after brushing your teeth, for example, rather than scheduling a separate cleaning session. The smaller and more automatic the routine, the more likely it survives contact with a busy, imperfect life. So the next time you notice someone's bathroom is spotless, or notice your own habits around one, remember it's rarely just about hygiene. It's personality, it's nervous system wiring, it's upbringing, it's a quiet form of control in a chaotic world, and sometimes it's even a little bit of social performance. None of that makes it superficial. If anything, it makes it one of the more honest windows into how someone's mind actually works, precisely because it's a habit performed when no one else is looking. If you saw yourself in this video, or finally understood why your roommate is like this, let me know in the comments. And if you want the next video in this series on the psychology of people who always show up late, subscribe, because that one's coming next.